The court of Zarinthia was a place of brilliance and fear. Towering spires of crystal reflected the pale light of three suns, and every hall echoed with whispers of power and politics. Today, the entire court had gathered for a ceremony that was meant to celebrate Princess Elira's coming of age, a moment that should have been radiant with joy. The princess, radiant in flowing silks that shimmered with colors no human eye could name, walked slowly toward the central dais. Her posture was perfect, as if every step had been practiced for centuries, yet her pale blue eyes flickered with something hidden, an anxiety she refused to show. The nobles watched her carefully. Each one weighed her steps, her gestures, her expression. In Zarinthia, appearances were everything. A princess who faltered even slightly could shatter alliances, start wars, or unravel centuries of diplomacy. Elira knew this. She had trained her whole life to meet this moment with grace, but today, something deep inside her screamed that she could not. Among the crowd, humans were rare. Only a handful had been allowed into this high court, and most remained silent, clutching their simple garb and trying not to attract attention. One human, a young man named Aaron, had come as part of a trade delegation. He had seen many wonders in his life, but nothing like this. The colors, the light, the alien elegance of the court, it all seemed almost unreal. Yet, even from where he stood, he could see the subtle tremor in the princess's hands. He felt a pang of worry he could not explain. The ceremony began. Music of strange instruments filled the halls, instruments that seemed to hum in harmony with the very walls themselves. Elira approached the dais, her face a mask of serenity. She raised her hand to accept the ceremonial crystal staff, a symbol of her maturity and her new responsibilities. The entire court held its collective breath. But then, as her fingers closed around the staff, her knees gave way. She swayed like a delicate reed in the wind, and before anyone could react, she collapsed onto the polished floor. Gasps filled the court. Some nobles whispered accusations, weakness, illness, incompetence. Others froze in shock, unsure if they should intervene or wait for ritual protocol. The royal attendants rushed forward, but their movements were careful, almost ritualistic, and Elira did not move. The crystal staff slipped from her fingers and clattered across the floor, shattering the perfect symmetry of the ceremony. For a moment, the court was silent, the kind of silence that presses down on the chest and makes hearts pound. Aaron stepped forward, despite the clear warning of protocol. He did not know the rules of Zarinthia, but he knew fear when he saw it. His instincts told him something was terribly wrong. He knelt beside Elira, whose breathing had become shallow and erratic. Her skin, which had seemed pale blue under the crystal lights, now had streaks of silver, a sign no human in the court could recognize. But Aaron could feel it. Something inside her was failing. The courtiers gasped again, this time louder. "Back!" one shouted. "This is not your place." Another added, "The ritual must proceed untouched." But Aaron ignored them. He leaned closer, his own heart racing, and placed a hand gently on the princess's wrist. He could feel her pulse, weak, irregular, almost fading. Elira's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief second she looked directly at him. No words came, only a look of absolute vulnerability that had never been seen in the grand halls of Zarinthia. In that look, Aaron felt something shift inside him, a connection that went beyond language, culture, or species. He understood something that no noble, no advisor, no court physician seemed to comprehend. The princess was not ill in the way they feared. She was suffocating. Not physically, but from the very rules, expectations, and constraints that bound her every moment of life. The court's brilliance, their whispers, their judgment, it was crushing her. Aaron whispered softly, almost to himself, "It's not your body, it's the court. They're hurting you." The words were simple, but in the silence of the hall, they sounded like thunder. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Elira's breathing began to steady, not fully, but enough that it was noticeable. Her small, trembling hand reached for Aaron, not out of ceremony, not out of obligation, but out of desperation. The court froze again, unable to understand the simple truth unfolding before their eyes. A human, an outsider, was the only one who understood the princess's suffering. And in that moment, the first walls began to crack. The court erupted in confusion. Shouts and murmurs collided, echoing off the crystal walls. Nobles scrambled to maintain decorum, their finely embroidered robes rustling as they leaned toward one another, whispering sharp accusations. Some demanded the royal attendants drag the princess away immediately, insisting that no outsider, especially a human, should touch her. Others froze, staring at Aaron in disbelief, as if he had crossed some invisible line that humans were never allowed to approach. Yet he did not move. His hand remained gently clasped around Elira, steadying her in a way that no court physician, no advisor had even attempted. Elira's breathing grew more regular, small waves of color returning to her skin. She lifted her head slightly and gave Aaron a look that was a mixture of relief and shock. The court had never seen such a vulnerable display from their princess. She had always been the image of perfection, untouchable, flawless, and eternally composed. Now lying on the polished floor, her eyes shining with unguarded fear, she seemed almost human. It was a word no one dared speak in Zarinthia. The chief physician finally approached, moving with the careful precision of someone used to giving orders, not comforting lives. He placed his hands near Elira, examining her with a clinical detachment. "She will recover," he said coldly, "but we must maintain protocol. The ceremony cannot be interrupted for sentiment." His words, meant to reassure the nobles, felt hollow. Aaron could see it. The princess's tension had not faded entirely. The pulse of her fear lingered, hidden beneath her slow breaths. Aaron did not step back. He shook his head slightly, ignoring the glares from the surrounding court. "It's not your body," he said again, his voice low but firm. "It's the weight of this place. They're suffocating you with rules and expectation. You don't need medicine, you need freedom." A murmur swept through the assembly. Some nobles stiffened, eyes narrowing at him. Others looked away, unsettled by the audacity of a human speaking to the princess in a way no courtier had dared. Aaron did not notice the stares. He focused entirely on Elira, and she seemed to understand that. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her fingers pressed tighter around his. She did not speak, but the gesture said everything. One of the high lords, a tall figure draped in silver and violet, finally shouted, "Step back! How dare you touch the princess without permission? This human knows nothing of our laws." His voice boomed, but Aaron's gaze never wavered. "She is in danger," Aaron replied evenly. "Not from illness, but from the weight you all place on her. Every expectation, every whisper, every glance, it's breaking her. If you truly care for her, you will let her breathe." The court fell silent again, more shocked than ever. No one had dared speak to the high lords like that, and certainly no human. Some even wondered if he was mad. Yet there was a strange energy in the air, a crack in the rigid order that had ruled for centuries. Elira finally spoke, her voice soft and trembling, barely louder than a whisper. He understands." The words floated through the hall like a fragile wind, and every noble turned their gaze toward Aaron. She repeated it, louder this time. "He understands why I cannot stand alone." The human heart of the court, so accustomed to ceremony, so bound to hierarchy, stilled in that moment. For the first time they saw the princess not as a symbol, but as a living being, fragile and overwhelmed. Some could not bear it, and they turned away. Others froze, unsure how to respond to such raw honesty in a place ruled by artifice. Aaron leaned closer to her, his voice gentle. "You are not alone," he said. "No matter what happens, I will help you." And in that moment, Elira felt a warmth she had never known in the cold, glittering halls of Zarinthia. She had spent her entire life hiding her fear behind perfection, but now someone understood her completely. The ceremony could wait. The courtiers might rage, the lords might demand obedience, but none of that mattered to Elira in that instant. Her trembling fingers found strength in Aaron's hand, and she slowly pushed herself into a sitting position, leaning against him. It was a small act, almost insignificant to the court, but it was rebellion, the first act of defiance in her life. And as she looked around, meeting the eyes of those who had once judged her, she realized something powerful. Strength was not in standing alone, but in letting someone else understand and share your burden. The halls were still tense, the nobles restless, but for the first time, Elira felt a spark of hope. She was no longer alone, and Aaron, the human who had dared to defy centuries of tradition, had given her that gift. The court could barely breathe. The nobles' whispers were sharp knives slicing through the crystalline walls, and the High Lord's eyes burned with a fury that threatened to ignite the entire hall. Protocol had been shattered. A human had touched the princess, spoken to her, and most dangerously, she had leaned on him. This was unheard of, unthinkable. And yet, Elira remained upright, supported by Aaron, her small hand clutching his with a quiet determination that stunned everyone. One of the senior lords, a wiry man with piercing amber eyes, stepped forward. His voice was loud and commanding, carrying the weight of centuries. "Princess Elira," he said, "you will rise and continue the ceremony. This display of weakness cannot be tolerated." His gaze fell on Aaron, full of scorn. "And you humans, step back immediately. You have no place here." Aaron did not move. His calm defiance was a stark contrast to the furious energy of the court. "She will rise," he said softly, "but not because of fear. She will rise because she chooses to." The words were quiet, but they carried an unshakable authority, as if the universe itself had lent him power. The nobles stiffened. They had never seen such confidence from a human before. Elira's lips trembled. For a moment she thought about obeying the lords, about forcing herself to stand and hide her fear once again. But then she looked into Aaron's steady eyes, and something inside her shifted. She could no longer hide behind perfection, could no longer suffocate herself for the sake of appearances. Slowly, she stood, not perfectly, not without effort, but with determination. She straightened her back and lifted her chin, her blue eyes burning like twin stars. The court gasped. Never had they seen the princess rise in such a way after collapsing. Some of the nobles, even the harshest, could not hide their surprise, but many still whispered accusations of impropriety and weakness. The senior lord's hand clenched into a fist, and he bellowed, "Enough! The ritual cannot be delayed for sentimentality." Elira met his gaze steadily. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and firm, though tinged with vulnerability. "I will continue the ceremony," she said, "but on my terms, not as a symbol of perfection, but as someone who lives and breathes and who will not be suffocated by fear or expectation." The hall went silent. Those words, so simple and honest, were like a lightning strike. Aaron felt her fingers tighten around his. He nodded slightly, silently encouraging her. The princess had made her choice, and in doing so, she had defied centuries of tradition. The court could rage, threaten, and protest, but she was no longer their fragile ornament. She was a living being, capable of strength, capable of defiance. Some lords attempted to challenge her, stepping forward with sharp words, but Elira held up a hand. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not waver. "I am not weak," she said. "I am simply human in the way you refuse to see, and I will no longer hide behind the rules that choke me." The words were not just for the court. They were a declaration to herself, a promise that she would never again let fear dominate her life. A murmur ran through the assembly. Some of the nobles began to nod subtly, almost imperceptibly. Others were horrified, their faces twisting with anger and disbelief. But even as the court reacted, one truth became undeniable. A human had understood the princess when none of her own people could. Aaron had seen her fear, had reached past the ceremony and ritual, and had given her a choice she had never thought possible. Slowly, she reached for the crystal staff once again. It shimmered in her hands, heavier now, but no longer a symbol of suffocating expectation. It was a tool she could use, a symbol she could bend to her will. The staff hummed faintly, as if sensing her newfound determination. The nobles watched, astonished, as Elira began to guide the ritual herself, with Aaron quietly at her side, offering support without command, without interference. The air in the court shifted. Where there had been fear and rigid control, there was now possibility. Tradition had not been destroyed, but it had been challenged. The princess had taken the first step toward freedom, and in doing so, she had made a statement the entire court would remember for generations. True strength was not perfection, but courage. The courage to let someone understand you, the courage to rise even when the world expected you to fall. And in that charged, crystalline hall, the bond between Elira and Aaron grew, silent but unbreakable. They were two beings from different worlds, connected by understanding, trust, and the defiance of expectations. The court might have questioned it, might have feared it, but for Elira, it was the first time in her life that she felt truly alive. The echoes of Elira's defiance still lingered in the grand halls of Zarinthia when the first consequences began to appear. The court was restless. Whispers grew louder, no longer restrained by protocol. Some nobles left in haughty silence, offended that a princess had dared to show weakness and then claim her own strength. Others lingered, curious and unsettled, unsure if they should report her actions to the ruling council or quietly observe this new, daring behavior. But among them, a more dangerous force was moving, the unseen mechanisms of power that could crush a princess without warning. Aaron stayed close to Elira, his presence calm but unyielding. He did not speak much, understanding that words were fragile shields in this court. His steady eyes, however, provided more support than any speech. The princess leaned on him as they moved through the corridors, her steps deliberate but slow. Every glance from the nobility still carried judgment, every whisper a potential trap. Yet she walked taller than she ever had because for the first time she felt that someone truly saw her. Then came the summons. A stern messenger arrived, a tall figure cloaked in deep violet, his expression unreadable. "Princess Elira," he intoned, "the High Council requests your presence immediately. They have urgent matters regarding your recent conduct." There was no question in his voice, only the rigid authority of centuries. He did not bow to Aaron, he did not acknowledge the human at all. But Elira's hand tightened around Aaron's. She did not hesitate. "You will wait outside," the princess said softly to him. Aaron shook his head, but she smiled faintly. "No," she said, "I choose who stands with me." And with that, they entered the chamber together. The council room was cold, its walls lined with statues of past rulers, all staring down with judgmental eyes. The council members themselves were equally intimidating, their faces carved with years of tradition and authority. One of them, a woman with sharp silver hair and a voice like steel, spoke first. "Princess Elira, your actions have disturbed the court. You defied protocol, allowed a human to touch you, and spoke words that challenged centuries of law. How do you defend yourself?" Elira met her gaze without fear. "I defend myself by being alive," she said simply. "I cannot live as a symbol while my mind and heart are imprisoned. Aaron understood what no one else could, that I am more than my duties, and I will not apologize for that." Murmurs ran through the council. Some faces darkened with anger, others softened with surprise. The silver-haired counselor's lips tightened. "Your words are dangerous," she said. "They encourage disorder. If you continue, you risk not just your reputation, but your position and your life." Elira's fingers brushed against Aaron as she spoke. "I am aware of the risks," she said, "but life is meaningless if I am only perfection in the eyes of others. I will face the consequences, but I will not be silenced." A tense silence followed. The council debated fiercely in low voices, their arguments punctuated by sharp glances toward Elira and Aaron. No human had ever dared enter this chamber, let alone challenge centuries of tradition, and the fact that Elira had chosen him as her ally shook their rigid world to its core. Suddenly, a younger counselor, someone who had not yet hardened in the ways of tradition, spoke up. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "the princess shows courage. Perhaps this human sees what we cannot. Maybe we should listen before condemning." His words caused a ripple of shock. For the first time, a voice within the council considered understanding rather than punishment. Elira turned to Aaron, giving him the faintest smile. She did not need to speak the gratitude she felt. In this room of stone and judgment, he had given her the courage to face even the highest authority without fear. And in that moment, something shifted. The council could sense it. This was no longer a frightened princess. This was a leader who had claimed her own strength, and she did so with a human at her side, someone they had underestimated. The chamber remained tense, but a subtle energy had entered. The council would still challenge her, and danger still lingered, but Elira had proven that courage, understanding, and trust could break the suffocating chains of tradition. And Aaron, silent but unwavering, was now more than a companion. He was a symbol of a new way forward, a reminder that even in a court of perfection, a human could see the truth of a being's heart. Elira's voice, soft yet steady, broke the silence once more. "I will face your judgment, but know this, strength is not in blind obedience. It is in understanding, in courage, and in choosing who will walk beside you. I choose Aaron." For the first time in generations, the council had no immediate answer. And in that quiet, powerful pause, a new chapter of Zarinthia's history began to form, one where humanity, courage, and empathy could stand alongside tradition. The corridors of Zarinthia felt colder than ever as Elira and Aaron left the council chamber. Outside, sunlight glinted off the crystal towers, but the brightness could not warm the tension coiling around them. Every noble they passed seemed to study them, some with barely concealed suspicion, others with open hostility. The court had felt the shift in power during the council, and not all were willing to accept it. Some whispered of revolt, of punishments long forbidden but now justified. Elira's fingers brushed Aaron's. She did not speak, but the touch was enough. Her pulse had steadied since the council, yet a new unease settled over her, Authority could be defied in words, but hearts hardened by tradition were far more dangerous. Aaron could sense her tension. He kept his steps measured, matching hers, providing silent support without intruding. He had learned the delicate balance between courage and caution in this alien court, a balance Elira needed desperately. As they reached the outer courtyard, a group of guards blocked their path. Their armor gleamed under the suns, each piece etched with the emblem of Zarinthia's ruling house. The lead guard, a tall figure with a face carved from stone, stepped forward. "Princess Elira," he said, his voice neutral but laced with authority, "orders from the High Council. You are to remain under supervision. Any attempt to defy will be considered treason." Elira's eyes narrowed. The council had dared to restrict her freedom even after she had faced them with courage. She did not flinch, though the weight of their threat pressed on her chest. "I am under no one's control but my own," she said firmly. "I will not be confined by fear, nor by chains I did not choose to wear." Aaron stepped forward slightly, keeping his hand near hers, a subtle anchor. The guards hesitated. Never before had a human dared to speak in such a tone within Zarinthia, and they were unsure how to respond. One of the younger guards shifted nervously, but the lead guard's expression remained hard. "Orders are orders," he said. "Do not test us." Elira raised her chin. "I will not test you. I only ask that you see me as I am, not a symbol but a person. My life is mine to live." The words, though calm, carried a weight that echoed across the courtyard. The guards faltered as if her courage had shaken the certainty of centuries. Then a sudden commotion erupted from the other side of the courtyard. A group of nobles, led by a council member who had opposed Elira's defiance, had gathered. They moved quickly, their robes swirling, faces flushed with anger. "Stop her!" one shouted. "She violates all laws, she corrupts the court." Elira did not panic. Instead, she stepped closer to Aaron, her hand finding his. "We will face them together," she said, her voice steady. The nobles advanced, their anger palpable, and a tense standoff formed. Every eye in the courtyard was on them. Aaron kept a calm presence beside her, scanning the crowd. Though he was human and far from home, he had learned to trust his instincts, and Elira's courage amplified them. He spoke quietly to her. "Don't let them see fear. They feed on it. Stand with me, and we will show them the strength of choice." Elira nodded, feeling the truth in his words. For the first time, she realized that courage was not only defiance, it was shared. She did not have to face the court alone. She had someone who understood, someone who believed in her even when the halls of tradition seemed unyielding. The nobles stopped just short of them, sensing the unspoken power radiating from the pair. A silence fell, broken only by the whisper of wind over crystal spires. Then Elira spoke, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "You may demand obedience, but I demand understanding. I will not be your symbol. I am Elira, and I choose freedom." The words struck like thunder. Some of the nobles recoiled, shocked that a princess would speak with such authority. Others hesitated, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Aaron squeezed her hand gently, grounding her as the energy in the courtyard shifted. They were outnumbered, but they were not weak. Together, human and princess, they had become something greater than fear. And in that moment, a dangerous truth became clear. Defiance had consequences. Some would resist, some would plot, and some might try to harm her. But Elira no longer faced the world alone. She had found understanding in a human, something stronger than fear, stronger than tradition, stronger than centuries of expectation. The first real threat to her courage had arrived, and the princess, with Aaron at her side, was ready. Night fell over Zarinthia, painting the crystal towers in shades of silver and violet, but the city was far from calm. Rumors of the princess's defiance spread quickly, carried by couriers and whispered in every hall. Some celebrated her courage in secret, while others fumed, plotting how to restore what they believed was proper order. Among those plotting was Lord Varys, a high-ranking noble whose ambition and fear of change had always guided him. Tonight, he moved with quiet precision, determined to confront Elira before her courage became contagious. Aaron and Elira stood in a secluded terrace overlooking the city lights. The princess's heart still raced from the confrontation in the courtyard, and Aaron sensed her tension, subtle but persistent. "They will not rest until they break you," he said softly, "but you do not have to face them alone." Elira exhaled, leaning slightly against him. "I know," she whispered. I feel stronger with you here, but fear is still there. I have never faced such determination to control me. Erin tilted her chin gently. Fear is natural. Courage is what you choose despite it, and right now you are more courageous than anyone in this court. His words were steady, like the calm center of a storm, and for a moment, Elira allowed herself to believe them. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden shout. Torches flared as guards approached the terrace, led by Lord Varys himself. His presence was imposing, every movement precise, his eyes cold with anger. "Princess Elira," he said, voice low but venomous, "you have gone too far. The court cannot allow your defiance to continue. You will come with me." Elira's pulse quickened, but she did not retreat. She stepped in front of Erin, placing herself firmly between him and the Lord. "I will not," she said simply, yet with unwavering authority. "You cannot command me. My life is mine." Varys's lips curled into a sneer. "You speak of freedom, yet you lean on a human. Your strength is an illusion." His gaze darted toward Erin, dismissive yet calculating. "And as for you, outsider, you will leave or you will suffer consequences." Erin's stance was calm but protective. "I will not leave," he said, his voice firm. "Not when she needs me, not when she has the courage to stand for herself." Varys took a step forward, hand reaching for the ceremonial blade at his side. "Then you leave me no choice," he said, and the guards moved to surround them. Elira's eyes met Erin's. She felt the surge of fear, but also the pulse of courage. "We are stronger together," she said. "They cannot break me while I have someone who sees me for who I am." Varys's face darkened, but before he could act, something unexpected happened. The younger counselor who had spoken in her favor earlier appeared at the terrace entrance, raising his hand. "Enough," he said, his voice steady. "You will not harm her, not while I am here." His presence disrupted Varys's authority, giving Elira and Erin a brief moment of reprieve. Elira took a deep breath. She felt the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down, yet she also felt something far stronger, the bond of trust, understanding, and courage she shared with Erin. Together, they had faced whispers, judgment, and threats. Now they faced the first clear attempt to control her by force, and together they would endure it. The tension in the terrace was palpable. Torches flickered, shadows dancing across the walls as if the building itself were holding its breath. Varys's fury was barely contained, the guards unsure how to act against the unshakable resolve of the princess and the calm defiance of the human beside her. Elira raised her head, letting her gaze sweep over the city she had always known as a place of duty and expectation. Now it was also a place of choice, courage, and possibility. "We will not run," she said quietly but firmly. "We will face this, and they will see that true strength is not blind obedience. It is understanding, courage, and trust." Erin nodded, his grip firm around her hand. Together they stood, two beings from different worlds, confronting the rigid walls of tradition and the first real threat to Elira's freedom. And as the night deepened, the crystal towers seemed to shimmer brighter, as if reflecting the spark of defiance and hope that now burned within the princess's heart. For the first time, Zarinthia would see that courage, when shared, could defy even the most unyielding rules. And Elira, the princess who had collapsed before her court, was no longer alone. The first rays of dawn painted the crystal towers of Zarinthia in soft gold, but the tension in the air was sharper than ever. The standoff from the previous night had not ended. Word of Elira's defiance spread like wildfire, and today the High Council had convened in full. Courtiers, guards, and nobles filled the grand hall, their faces a mixture of outrage, fear, and awe. At the center of it all stood Elira, upright and unwavering, Erin by her side. Together, they were a quiet storm that demanded attention. Lord Varys stepped forward, his fury evident. "Princess Elira," he thundered, "your continued defiance is intolerable. You have humiliated the court, endangered tradition, and flouted every rule of Zarinthia. Submit to the council or face the consequences." His voice echoed through the hall, intended to intimidate, yet it felt hollow compared to the strength emanating from Elira. Elira's blue eyes met his without a flicker of fear. "I will not submit," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of all her courage. "I will not allow fear, tradition, or expectation to control me. I am Elira. I am alive, I am human in spirit, and I choose to live freely." Her words spread across the hall like a wave, shaking even the most rigid hearts. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some courtiers gasped at her boldness. Others whispered in admiration. Even those loyal to Varys paused, unsure how to respond to such raw honesty. It was a defiance no one had seen in generations, a defiance that was not reckless but born of understanding, courage, and love for life. Aaron tightened his grip around her hand. "You are not alone," he said softly, loud enough for her to hear. "I will stand with you always." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of loyalty and trust, echoing in a court that had never known such bonds between human and alien. Varys's face darkened, but the High Council hesitated. They had expected fear, obedience, perhaps tears, but not this. Elira's calm defiance, supported by a human who refused to be intimidated, challenged the very foundation of their authority. The hall was silent for a long, tense moment. Then, unexpectedly, one of the older counselors spoke. "She speaks the truth," he said slowly, his voice steady but quiet. "We have long valued protocol over understanding, ceremony over life. Perhaps it is time to see our princess as she truly is, not as a symbol." His words were like a key turning in a lock, slowly opening the possibility for change. Varys seethed, realizing that even the council could not unanimously condemn her. His plans to crush her courage were faltering, and the weight of centuries of tradition suddenly felt fragile under the strength of one human understanding and one princess's defiance. Elira took a step forward, lifting the ceremonial crystal staff. Its light refracted through the hall, casting patterns across the walls like rivers of possibility. "I will honor Zarinthia," she said, "but I will do so on my own terms. I will lead with courage, not fear. I will live as a person, not as a symbol. And I will not be alone because true strength lies in understanding, trust, and the bonds we choose." The council could no longer ignore the truth in her words. Slowly, one by one, nobles began to nod, acknowledging her courage. Some still resisted, but even they could not deny the transformation taking place. Elira had turned fear into hope, expectation into choice, and defiance into a force that no tradition could extinguish. Aaron stepped closer, his presence steady and unwavering. "You have already changed this court," he said quietly. "You have shown them what courage looks like. You have shown them that understanding matters more than ceremony." Elira smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and pride. "And you," she said, looking into his eyes, "have given me the strength to be me." The hall seemed to pause, the words sinking in. For centuries, the court had never witnessed such honesty, such trust, such bravery, and now it could not turn away from it. As the first sun fully rose, its light touched the princess and the human beside her. In that golden glow, the court saw not a fragile symbol, but a living being whose courage could inspire generations. Elira had collapsed before them once, but now she stood taller than ever, supported by a human who had truly understood her. Together, they had turned fear into hope, tradition into possibility, and weakness into undeniable strength. For the first time in Zarinthia's history, the court understood that the greatest power did not lie in ceremony or rigid rules. It lay in empathy, courage, and the human heart that had chosen to see beyond appearances. And in that moment, Princess Elira knew she was free, not because tradition allowed it, but because she had the courage to claim her life, and a human who had the understanding to stand beside her. The court could no longer ignore it. Sometimes, the outsiders are the ones who see us most clearly, and the bravest hearts are those that refuse to bow to fear.